I am a counselor and I started doing research for this video and I found out that there are at least 13 different names just for what I do. Not even counting the other types of mental health professionals we're going to get into. So let's clarify this a little bit because no wonder people are confused. I'm Leslie Stevens. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Texas, and I post videos about counseling and mental health with the help of my future therapy dog, Rio. So yeah, 13. I'm gonna read off a list because ain't no way I'm gonna be able to just remember all this, and I don't expect you to either. LMHC, LAC, LPCC, LPCMH, LACMH, LAPC, LCPC. Should I go on? Or do you feel like I'm speaking another language right now? Because I feel that way and I'm in this field. I say in my intro that I'm a licensed professional counselor. That's LPC in Texas and some other states. Some of the others that I read out, licensed mental health counselor, that one's pretty common. Licensed professional clinical counselor, licensed professional counselor of mental health. Basically, you're gonna look for somebody with counselor in the name, with therapist in the name, or with social worker in the name. And we'll get into all that later and how you're gonna find that. Right now, let's just go over the ones in Texas, and you're gonna have some equivalents in your states or wherever you are. So what I am, an LPC, the way you become that in Texas is have a bachelor's degree. Mine was not in psychology. Most are going to want that. Mine was in education. And so I got in to be a school counselor, changed my mind. I was going to do both tracks because it was just a few more classes. Yeah, school counselors, they're actually mental health professionals. Who knew? So once I finished my master's in professional counseling, it's got to be a counseling related field or psychology, something similar. So once I finished my master's degree in professional counseling, I took a test and then I started what we used to call an internship. Now they're calling it an associateship. So it's a licensed professional counselor associate. So that's why you hear those acronyms with the A in there. They're throwing that in there. Those are people who have just graduated. They're not quite fully licensed yet, but they can practice. So I could see clients as long as I had a supervisor. I was working under that supervisor. They have to have special training all their own. That's a whole other video. So that supervisor would meet with me once a week. We'd go over different cases, anything I was struggling with. He also worked at the same agency where I was. So he would check in on me and another, at the time, intern. Kind of glad they got rid of that word because people would think like, ooh, you're still in school. I haven't even graduated. So it was kind of like if you were seeing a licensed professional counselor associate, you kind of have two counselors because you've got the ideas coming from that counselor, they're staffing it with their supervisor, and they may come back with more that their supervisor gave them. So kind of a win-win. I had to be an now called associate, an intern, for at least I think 2 years. It may have been 18 months. Close enough. I got it done right around 2 years. And what I got done was 3,000 hours under that supervisor that had to be logged. And half of those hours had to be face-to-face. So it had to be with a client, either in a group setting, a family setting, individual, had to be a clinical hour. So it couldn't be like, hey, I'm doing my notes. I'm learning how to be a counselor, which, I mean, that counted toward the 3,000 and that's great. And you need that, but they make us do half of it with a client. I mean, not one client. That'd be like a lot of sessions. So when I did that, I had to have so many hours with that supervisor, making sure that he was checking up on me, and the state had me log all these hours. So during that time, I'm meeting with the supervisor once a week and getting so many hours with him. And then it had to be logged, sent to the state reviewed it, then they came back and said, cool, you finished. You're a counselor. So what it means to be a fully licensed counselor is that I could open a private practice and work on my own. I could open a group practice and run it. I could start getting on insurance panels and billing insurances. That brings me to the next type of mental health professional that you're going to find in Texas, as well as some other places, and that's a social worker. This is the one that was the most confusing to me and still is, actually. Maybe I have some friends come on later and explain what their experience was like, and maybe I can see what the big differences between us are. I used to just think that social workers worked for CPS. So when I had friends that said, you should totally go into social work, I was like, haha, no, because that just sounds sad all day long. There are bachelor level social workers, which means they just have the bachelor's degree. I think they could take a test, be licensed, but you're not really going to see them doing clinical counseling. The two you're going to see in those roles are LMSW and LCSW, and that's a licensed master social worker and a licensed clinical social worker. A licensed master's social worker has gotten a master's degree in social work. They have taken a test and they are ready to roll. They're out into the world. So where the LPC has to take the test and they have to have a supervisor and they have to have all these hours, the LMSW just goes right out. The biggest difference you're going to find here is that if they're going to do clinical counseling, they've got to have a supervisor. They're working toward those hours to be a licensed clinical social worker. So LMSW, they take a test, they get out, they work, they can do like groups in a hospital, they can work in agencies, they can do all kinds of things. They just have to have somebody over them for the clinical counseling part. The way that an LMSW becomes an LCSW is they do an internship, just like the LPC, except not. Because they can do 3,000 hours of any type of work in clinical social work. They don't have to have at least 1,500 hours of face-to-face. They get the 3,000 and they can turn it in, they review it. They do have to have some face-to-face. It's not like they're not seeing clients. All of their supervisors are going to make them see clients in a clinical setting because that's what they're working toward. They're working toward becoming a counselor, basically. Only social worker. Once they turn all of their hours into the state, showing that they've had a supervisor and they've gone to their supervision and they've had some clinical hours and they've finished that 3,000 hours of clinical setting hours, then the state reviews that and make sure they pass their test and they become an LCSW. And they can work in the exact same capacity as an LPC. So they can run a private practice, they can start getting on insurance panels and billing insurance. Weird fun fact, social work is actually the older profession. Licensed professional counselor is newish. So to call a social worker a counselor is really weird. I guess it would be more like I'm doing social work, only not. Because their training is way different than what I had. Again, I'm going to read this because I didn't study that. Okay, for LMSW, some of the classes that I found when I looked up some of the programs were Human Behavior in Individual and Family Social Environments, Advanced Social Policy and Social Justice, definitely didn't have that in mind, Advanced Program Planning and Grant-Based Resource Development. That sounds just as interesting as my research class. They have some that were really similar, or they sound similar to what I had, like Advanced Diagnostic Assessment and Intervention with Individuals. Sounds like my psychopathology class where we learned about the Diagnostic Statistics Manual of Mental Health Disorders, where you find the diagnoses and you learn the criteria for those. Advanced Intervention with Families and Groups. All right, so like family therapy, group therapy. I had those classes. So there's a lot that's similar too. Another often overlooked professional in the mental health field are LMFTs, or Licensed Marriage Family Therapists. They might be different in other places. In Texas, that's what they are, LMFTs. When I've referred people to mental health professionals for counseling and I've had them on the list, I've had people say, oh, no, we don't need that. Yeah, I mean, your kid probably doesn't need to learn about marriage right now. They probably don't need marital therapy or couples therapy. But the main difference between the track for those who did LMFT at my school and those who did the LPC track, it was 3 classes. That's it. They had 3 classes that we didn't have to have. They were basically family and couples based. So they just have a little more training in that. And they'll have a different view of it because my theory is more individual based. Theories like what you follow your roadmap for how you're going to conduct therapy and what you're going to do if you feel lost. The theory that I chose is more individual based, whereas most LMFTs are going to pick something that's more systems based. So if you think about a clock, if one little cog isn't like working like it used to, it's not doing so well, the whole clock's going to be affected, right? So they learn theories of counseling based on that, based on their environment, based on the family. Just a little bit different, but they can totally see individuals for their mental health needs. So they get there by doing the master's in a counseling related field plus some marriage family therapy classes. And then when they get out, they take their test, they get their supervision. In Texas, they have to have 5,000 hours, and so many of those face-to-face hours, those like with a client hours like I had to have to be with more than one person in the room. It's got to be a couple or a family. So really, I'd say their path was a little harder. Another mental health professional that people get confused about, and in more than one way, but we'll go over that other way in another video, are psychologists. Psychologists can do clinical counseling, just like a counselor, just like a social worker, just like a marriage family therapist, but they can do other things too. So a lot of times you're going to see them in different settings. They're going to be in hospitals. They're going to be doing different types of testing that most people looking for an hour of therapy once a week aren't really going to need those services. They can administer tests that other clinicians can't do just because of their licensure and their level of training. But a lot of times they're doing those in other settings, not in that come into my office, sit on my couch, and let's talk about your week and your thinking and your feelings. Just know that when you're looking for a therapist, you're flipping through, you're looking at all these different letters after people's names and different types of titles. Psychologist is on the list too. You can see a psychologist for mental health therapy. So this brings me to the way you can find out who it is in your state. I keep saying that we submit all this to the state. We submit all this to the state. In America, we have to be under a licensing board. Surprise! Future Leslie and Rio here. We are coming to you from my old bedroom at my parents' house on July 4th weekend. Hey, happy July 4th. This video is supposed to go out tomorrow. A lot of life happened in between filming and posting. And when I was editing the video, I realized that I have no idea where the end of it is. Not a clue. So let's go ahead and just finish it up real quick. If you are looking for a therapist, they're going to have those letters after their name. Google those letters, find out what they mean in your state, and make sure that they have a licensing board. If they've got a licensing board, then they have ethics that they have to follow, and that's what you're looking for. Just making sure that somebody has those ethical rules that they have to follow to keep their license. They have to get continuing education and have a license with your state. Ours used to be under the Department of State Health Services. Now it is the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council. And yeah, I had to look that up because it just changed maybe a couple of years ago. I don't know. Time gets away from you. But anyway, make sure that who you're looking for is a licensed professional who had to get school, who had to get a license and a degree. Most importantly, out of all of that, make sure that you click with them. You have a good rapport with them. All right, so all of my family is out there waiting for us. So we're going to go swimming for the first time, and hopefully I'll have some footage of that. All right, bye y'all. I'm Leslie Stevens, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. Texas, as well as some global social worker, licensed clinical social worker, LCSW. Yeah. Hey, I finally got it out. I had to do that I had to be an intern, now called associate, for at least 2 years, 18 months. Alright, this is ridiculous. Oh, baby. I think we're gonna nap. Revision's over. Woohoo! Alright.